Thanks very much, Sam, for that introduction, and thanks everybody for having me this evening in your lounge rooms and home offices. I hope everybody's faring well over the last couple of months, and I hope you can see my slides okay. As Sam said, tonight's session is going to be in two parts. It's essentially looking at different ways of buying renewable energy at home, and then we're going to have a bit of a Q&A after that, and then looking at some general home energy efficiency in the second session. So we'll start clicking through. Now, buying renewables at home. Lots of different ways to buy renewables at home. Yeah, look, lots of different ways to access renewables at home. Obviously, pretty well known kind of what solar PV, rooftop solar does, things like solar hot water and heat pump hot water or efficient hot water systems. What we're going to focus on in the next kind of 15, 20 minutes is actually other options. I think Yara's done a bit of work in webinars recently looking at solar and sort of renewable hot water systems, but we're actually going to look at the last three here, which is more your GreenPower options, carbon offsets, and I'm going to introduce a concept that maybe people are familiar with, maybe they're not, called solar gardens, and talk to some issues around that. First of all, GreenPower. Looks as though half of you already buy it, or close to half, but roughly half of you don't. What is it? If you're not familiar with it, it's a little bit hard to explain, but essentially over the last 20 years in Australia, we've had a national renewable energy policy. It's had fixed and increasing targets in that policy each and every year over the last 20 years. And at the moment, we actually generate about almost a quarter of our electricity generation nationally from renewable energy. That's kind of a fixed scheme. It's had fixed targets sort of year on year. And governments make sure that industry, meets those targets year on year. What GreenPower does is GreenPower allows individuals like you and me and others to buy additional amounts of renewable energy through the system, through the GreenPower scheme, so that we actually buy more renewables than the formal policy mechanism sort of sets. So I guess its key aspects is that first of all, it's voluntary. GreenPower is a voluntary purchase. You don't have to buy it. It is actually leads to additional investment, additional purchases, and additional generation of renewable energy. It's an Australian-based scheme, so it's basically supporting Australian-based renewable energy projects, and really importantly, it's an audited scheme. So when you buy it, particularly usually through your retailer's actually audited by the GreenPower team. It's run largely out of state government offices, and they audit it annually to make sure that the amount that we all buy through the scheme is actually then purchased by your retailer on our behalf through the renewable energy market. Lots of different types of large-scale renewable energy projects can be GreenPower providers, but in the end, it's actually mainly large wind farms. It can be a little bit of hydro, and it can be increasingly some major solar projects as well. But for 20 years, it's mainly been large wind farms that you're really buying that GreenPower from. It's not bought from small technologies. So rooftop solar systems and solar hot water systems are not GreenPower providers. Generally, I mean, the way that you buy it, most people buy it from their retailer. It's a line item on your bill. How much you buy is a question. So you might buy enough to offset 100% of your electricity usage. You might buy 10% or 50% or whatever you decide. You'll obviously buy an amount in line with that percentage, and then you'll be charged a price per unit or a price per kilowatt hour, and that'll be, as I say, an item on the bill. Basically, all retailers offer it. There's about 20 odd retailers energy retailers in Victoria at the moment. But when you buy it, it doesn't really matter who you're buying it from. You're basically buying the same thing. GreenPower, a certificate in GreenPower is basically 1 megawatt hour of renewable electricity generation. It'll come from a different project. It might come from a project in central Victoria or southern parts of South Australia or different places, but it's essentially 1 megawatt hour of renewable electricity is exactly that, irrespective of which project it comes from, and it's additional to those renewable energy targets. The price of it might be different by different retailers. It's most likely to be, So that's one thing to watch, but it is, in and of itself, it's a product that it's pretty universal no matter who you're buying it from. You can actually buy it from other entities, not electricity retailers. They're called decoupled providers. At my work at Renew, we run a little scheme called C3, the Community Climate Chest, where we actually sell both GreenPower and offsets. And you can buy it if you buy it through us. You're also supporting an organisation that does a lot of advocacy work and research work in renewable energy, but most people do buy it through electricity retailers. Does it make a difference? Big question we always get asked, and the answer is unfortunately a bit mixed. Yes, GreenPower means that more investment, more dollars are going to renewable energy than otherwise would be the case, and more renewable electricity is generated. So that's a tick on the energy side of things. Does it actually make a difference in terms of our national emissions, our emissions trajectory? And unfortunately, the answer at the moment, and since 2013, is no. Prior to 2013, the national trajectory used to get adjusted in line with the amount of GreenPower sales each year, and this has stopped happening over the last 6 to 7 years. So, and GreenPower sales, to be fair, aren't enormous, but they would make a small difference. So this is something that we're not all that happy with as an organisation at Renew. And if that's kind of frustrating for you, then we'd probably suggest writing or talking to your local MP about why federal government isn't doing this anymore, so that people's GreenPower purchases actually makes an emissions difference as well as a renewable energy difference. So that's GreenPower. We can talk a bit more about that in the Q&A. Carbon offsets is probably the other main type of sort of voluntary certificate type purchase that consumers can make. What is it? What is a carbon offset? Well, according to Carbon Neutral, there's an organisation that's been around in this space in Australia for a long time. An offset is generated from an activity that prevents or reduces or removes greenhouse gas emissions from being released into the atmosphere. So I think that's a pretty good start as a definition. Practically, what is it? Well, again, it's a bit like GreenPower. It's a certificate. It's accredited under a particular scheme. It's associated with a particular project, an offsetting project. Generally, the certificate is worth, instead of 1 megawatt hour, like with GreenPower, it's worth 1 tonne of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions that are reduced. When you actually get a certificate, maybe you've bought 5 or 10 or 20 tonnes, and so that's what it'll say on the certificate, but essentially it's communicated in tonnage. What are these projects, these carbon offset projects? Well, there's lots of different sorts of ones. First point to make is that most of them are actually international. There are far less of these in Australia. They can be renewable energy projects, particularly internationally. So there's lots of actual international kind of wind farms and increasingly solar farms that are actually able to generate carbon offset certificates. It might be an industrial efficiency project where they're looking at investing in systems which reduce the amount of energy used in industrial processing. It can be very large commercial or industrial lighting projects where they're swapping out inefficient lighting of very large volumes to LED lighting in particular. Or it can be land management projects, and this is one that actually does exist in Australia in the NT at the moment, where it's got to do with burning, savanna burning of the land, and they do it at different times of the year. They do it during times of the year, i.e. not in summer, when it involves less emissions intensity in the burn itself. And that project is accredited and can actually create offsets and sell those to the market. Of course, forestry, tree planting is your classic kind of offset project. Pretty well known to people, you know, planting trees, sequestering carbon. Carbon is a way to create offsets and work within these kind of schemes. Also, your avoided forestry is another type of offsetting project. So this is where, you know, an entire area of vegetation was going to be cleared or logged, and it is not under business as usual kind of conditions, and it is not done so. And that within a particular scheme can be accredited as an offsetting project. This is a really good chart, or a little diagram from Choice. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but I think these slides will be sent out afterwards, and it's worth having a look at this because it explains, for a forestry type project, It explains how a project quite well will sort of work over a 20 to 30 year history in terms of how it gets set up, how certificates can be created and then sold to retailers and consumers, and how that project is managed to actually deliver emissions reductions over the long term. So worth looking at if you're wondering, you know, how do these projects actually work? Bit of context is important. So in Australia, we don't actually have a mandatory requirement as individuals, you know, for you and me and mums and dads and householders to reduce emissions. So there's no mandatory requirement we need to actually purchase offsets, or the same with GreenPower. Some companies do, some large companies do actually have mandatory requirements to meet a certain amount of their emissions by purchasing offsets or other activities each year. But as individuals, we have the opportunity to purchase these voluntarily. So largely for us, it's a voluntary market. Typical questions that we get asked. Classic one, are offsets dodgy or are they real? Do they actually make a difference? Same as the question with GreenPower. What do they cost? And of course, where can I buy them? Really that key question at the start is around, are these things dodgy? Are they real or not? Really the answer to this question and the question you should be asking people that are selling these things is, you know, has this offset actually been accredited or verified under a particular standard? Now the tricky bit is that there's lots of standards around. There's not just one. Most of them are international. Australia does have one. And the international standards have been around a lot longer. They're not very well known though. The standards themselves are really important. So why do you have them to start with? So that you can actually verify that projects are delivering real measurable emissions reductions, that they're actually additional beyond what we call business as usual, beyond what would have happened anyway, that they're actually permanent, they're not short-term or they're not cyclical and the emissions will come back, that they actually do remove or avoid emissions for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. By certain activities not going ahead or changing the way that they're done. And critically, I think the most important bit with standards is that they allow projects to be independently verified. So it's not just the project owner saying, yeah, this is definitely an offset project and it's worthwhile and it's real. They can be independently audited and within the context of a scheme, and you can then hopefully therefore have confidence because they get a tick at the end that they do meet the requirements of that particular standard. Most common standard internationally really now is called a verified carbon standard. It used to be called the voluntary carbon standard. It's been around for 20 plus years. It's certainly one that we work with quite a lot through our scheme. It's really VCS certificates that we trade through our little C3 scheme. There are other standards internationally. The gold standard was started by the WWF some time ago. Social carbon standard is another interesting one because it brings in additional criteria, not just emissions reductions, but also economic development and social development criteria. These are kind of the main ones, I guess, that we would trust. You might hear of some other ones, but you really need to understand, well, you know, what are the requirements of this standard? How do they actually prove that these offsets and these projects are real and verifiable and all of those things. In Australia, we have one standard. It's been around for a few years called the National Carbon Offset Standard. If you are buying certificates from Australian projects, it is definitely strongly advised to ask the question whether or not that project has been certified under that standard. The reality is there are not that many offset projects going on in Australia, particularly that serve the voluntary market for the likes of you and I. But it is worth asking that question. What do they cost? They range. Generally speaking, offsets cost less generally than GreenPower. International offsets generally cost less than Australian ones, given the small size of our market. To give you some rough numbers there, GreenPower at the moment in Victoria, because of our high emissions intensity, is actually relatively cheap compared to where it's been. It's down around $30 a tonne. It has been well up over $100 a tonne in recent years. Australian-based offset certificates down around sort of $20 to $25 a tonne, and international offsets can be as low as $1 or $2, but often around more the $5 to $10 mark per tonne. If they're down around the $1, $2 mark, you've got to really start to ask questions about, well, is this actually accredited under any meaningful scheme at all? How much will it actually cost you to offset your activities in life or for your home, your household? Well, you have to do a little bit of work to understand this, because it comes back to how much, carbon do you actually emit as a person or as a household. Here's one way to do it. Victorian government report from a couple of years ago suggests that per person, each of us, each Victorian, emits around 18 tonnes a year. So if you put that into a kind of a 2 to 4 person household, talking about sort of 40 to 80 tonnes per annum. So if you then want to offset the entire amount, 100% of all of those activities, and that's just not energy use, but it's transport and it's waste and all the other things. If you do that via GreenPower at current Victorian prices, it might be in the order of $1,000 to $2,500 a year. If you use an Australian offset, it might be somewhere between $700 and $2,000 a year. And if you're using an international offset, it's probably around the sort of $500 to $1,000 mark, but it could be as low as $70. But again, it calls into question the validity of that offset and the scheme that it's been generated from. Where can you buy them? There's not that many places you can actually buy offsets just as individuals, as individual consumers. One very good organisation that's been around a long time, over 20 years in Victoria, is called Greenfleet. They're largely a very large tree planting sort of organisation. Been running a long time, and they do sell offsets from their programs to retail kind of consumers. Another organisation I mentioned at the start, Carbon Neutral, again, been around almost 20 years, have their own projects. They do a lot of, obviously, corporate and business offsetting projects, particularly for businesses that need to do that from a mandatory perspective. But my understanding is they also do sell to individuals. And our little scheme at work too, C3, the Community Climate Chest, also sells offsets. We actually sell VCS, pretty much only VCS accredited offsets. If your retailer tells you that all their energy is green, this is a claim that we see quite a lot. Questions, need to be asked. The question is really, how can they justify that all of their electricity they sell or all their energy they sell to you? We've seen gas retailers do this sometimes. How can they justify that all of that is green? What specific accredited certificate or standard? What certificate are they selling, or what standard is that certificate being accredited under? Under what international or Australian program does that certificate come from? Or are they actually referring to GreenPower? It can get confusing at times. Retailers can be talking about offsets where they actually mean they're selling you GreenPower. Also, some retailers own different amounts of renewable generation in their overall portfolio. And so they will say, a lot of more of our electricity comes from renewables than the average in the electricity grid. But it can be very hard to sort of trace that back and try and get proof on that. So you need to ask some questions of that. There is a website to try and understand how green electricity retailers are. It's a difficult exercise to go through. There's an organisation in New South Wales called Total Environment Centre, along with Greenpeace, who have put out what's called the Green Electricity Guide. They've done this a number of times over the last 10 years. The latest version of this, there's the web link there. The latest version's a couple of years old, but they do actually rank Australian retailers based on the renewable assets that they own and their environmental practices. Getting full transparency of what electricity and gas retailers actually own and how they offset, and the details of their portfolio and their contracts with other electricity generators is a bit opaque, and it is difficult to do, but this is really the best guide that exists to try and get a sense of overall who the best kind of green retailers are. I want to talk a little bit about solar gardens, not too long, because I know we need to get to Q&A, but it's worth mentioning. Solar gardens are new. Maybe people have heard about them, maybe they haven't. A solar garden is a way to access renewable energy without having particularly solar on it. They're usually solar projects without actually having solar on your roof. It basically involves you directly owning a share of panels or subscribing to a program which involves a larger solar project that is off-site. It is somewhere, it's out in the countryside in another state. It's obviously not on your home or on your apartment building. And it allows you, through your retailer, to get an actual credit on your electricity bill for being part of that scheme. Here's a basic little diagram which is put out by ARENA, the federal government agency, which just sort of maps the three main components. You've obviously got consumers living in a building, might be in apartments, might be renters, people that struggle to actually get direct access to solar by putting on their own roof. They subscribe to a program where it's linked to a specific solar project. It's just not in your location, it's somewhere else. And then that is also linked to your retailer, and your retailer is able to provide you some sort of benefit, whether it's a feed-in tariff credit or similar. Maybe it's a reduction in your individual tariff cost, but it directly links you to that project, and then you can access renewable energy through that scheme. So you can imagine you can have a big solar farm sitting out in a field somewhere in central Victoria, and you own, out of a field of 1,000 panels, you own or you subscribe to 4 of them or 6 of them, and your neighbour does the same, and the coffee shop and apartment building up the road, they all own different parts of the panels. And that's actually linked back to your electricity usage in your bill. Sounds pretty exciting. It is. Where can you sign up? Well, it's early days. There aren't a lot of these projects around at the moment yet. There is one worth checking out in New South Wales, which has been put together by a community energy retailer called Innova Energy, and there's a web address there I'd encourage you to have a look at. We've got some information on our website about them, but there's also actually a campaign run by the Community Power Agency with the address at the bottom, that is trying to get government support to get more of these solar gardens up and running, because they can benefit consumers that would otherwise have a lot of difficulty accessing solar directly. And the last slide here before we hop to Q&A, it's just one other scheme that's around in Victoria. It's called Solar Savers. People may have heard of it. It's a local government run program. There's about 9 or 10 local governments currently subscribed to the program. I don't think Yarra is one as yet, but it may do in the future. It essentially allows people to borrow and repay the sort of upfront cost of solar panels to put on their own roofs through the council rate system, and has been fairly successful in a number of councils to date. Worth checking out. Solar Savers, there is the web address, and might need a little bit of lobbying to the elected members in Yarra to see if this might be an opportunity. Anyway, we'll leave that one there for the moment. I might hand over to Sam and see what questions we have.
Great, thanks so much, Damien. I might be a little bit cheeky and take the liberty of asking the first question, if that's all right. And that's, I guess, about how green power and carbon offsets might interact. So if I'm at home and I'm thinking I'd like to buy green power, are my options that I could buy 100% green power, or if I didn't do that, the portion that I didn't buy in green power I would offset? Is that how those two kind of go together?
Yeah. One way to think about it is, so there's your carbon footprint is to do with a lot more than just electricity usage. So that's one way to think about. So first of all, you have to go, okay, well, and there's different calculators online to help you work out what your carbon footprint is. Green power is generally used to offset all or part of your electricity usage. It can be used as an offset certificate for other carbon emitting activities that you do as well. But offsets are typically historically kind of used with gas use, with transport, obviously with flights and waste as well. Green power is a scheme that was sort of set up for electricity usage in particular. One little interesting bit is that, as I sort of said at the start, that almost a quarter of our electricity is actually green at the moment, just the normal electricity coming through the grid. So one argument is you could possibly offset 75% of your electricity usage, and then largely you'd be 100% offset. There's different ways of kind of working it out, but it sort of does start with taking a step back and going, well, getting a sense of what's my overall carbon impact probably on an annual basis, and either individually or at a household level, and then starting to work out, okay, well, what am I going to use either green power offsets to actually offset all of that, or the majority of that, or an amount that's larger than the government's currently doing, starting to work through those questions.
Great. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. So I might go to some of the questions that that people have posted. So the first one is around renewable energy and government regulations. So are there any government regulations and checks done on, I guess, retailers who are making claims or offering green power to keep them accountable on their claims?
Yes, very good question. There are many claims made by retailers on many different areas, which we would question at times. The beauty of the GreenPower scheme ultimately, and this is why we do like it, is that it's an independently audited scheme. So they really can't get away with saying to you that they've sold you GreenPower when they haven't actually purchased specifically a GreenPower certificate through the GreenPower scheme. And it's actually pretty easy for you to check that with your retailer. They can actually provide you evidence of that. And they're also audited in terms of their total sales of GreenPower per year by state governments. Generally, the New South Wales and Victorian state governments kind of lead the audit, verification component of the scheme. So GreenPower is better on that front. It's not to say that still energy retailers make some spurious claims, and they do make claims like, oh, look, all of our electricity is green. That may or may not be the case, but it is either GreenPower or it is not, and it is fairly easy to trace back whether it is actually through the GreenPower scheme.
Okay, thank you. So, you know, you're talking about buying green power does positively contribute to renewable energy generation, but doesn't necessarily bring down the emissions trajectory. So what the question here is, are you saying that green power doesn't make a difference to emissions, or are you saying that the difference is not measured and reported in the statistics?
It's definitely the latter, and it's kind of partial. It's complex. It's partially the former as well. Definitely in the statistics, if next year's total number of tonnes that's projected for Australia is 485 million tonnes for the year, then if we all went out and bought green power tomorrow, unfortunately that doesn't change that target for next year in terms of the emissions trajectory. Of course, if we did all do that and suddenly we doubled the amount of renewable electricity overnight, then yes, you would find that actually, maybe a lot less gas-fired electricity generation, or maybe even another coal plant would close. And then yes, at a macro scale, it could actually have that impact. Green power is still at a national level. The size of the market is fairly small. It was actually a lot larger about 10 years ago. And with the uptake of rooftop solar, it has dropped off a bit. So at the scale that it is now, no, it won't really change. Certainly not at a reporting level, and not make a huge difference even at an actual emissions level.
Okay. The next question is about carbon offsets and whether they're tax deductible, and is there a cap?
That's a great question. They are normally not tax deductible, although in our little scheme at work, the C3 scheme, because we're a not-for-profit and we use the funds for our kind of advocacy work and campaigning work around renewables, we do actually have a scheme that has DGR status on it. So if you buy green power or offsets through us, you actually get a tax deductible certificate. Most schemes and providers, that's not the case. And sorry, I missed the other part of that question.
Is there a cap on carbon, on how many carbon offsets you can buy?
No. There's not. Personally, your soft cap would be 100% of your total carbon footprint, but you could also buy for the rest of your family or your whole street. Or sky's the limit.
So the next question is also about offsets, and the question is, are offsets worthwhile if the emissions occur immediately, but the offset absorbs carbon slowly? So for example, planting trees. So if there's a timing difference between the emissions occurring and the absorption of carbon, is that time perhaps critical to climate change, climate emergency?
There is always a timing difference with these sort of projects, whether it's green power, whether it's offsets. There's no such project where you buy it now and it happens tonight or tomorrow. Generally, you are buying either emissions reductions or renewable energy from a project, or energy efficiency from a project that you know, that benefit is playing out over time. So the choice slide is not bad on this, because that choice slide demonstrates that you're talking about a 30-year project, which is planting trees, and they can fairly accurately work out how much carbon is going to be sequestered over 30 years, and you are buying a small proportion of that. But there's no, you know, it's hard to think about it as like a direct link that it's really happening, you know, right now, or an additional megawatt hour is generated from a renewable energy generator tonight because you bought GreenPower. It's certainly not a direct link like that.
Okay. Now this is our last question. So how effective is carbon offsetting if there was little to no effort put into actually reducing your emissions? So you still drive to work every day, you eat red meat every day. Is offsetting effective if you don't really address those things as well?
Great question. There are many organisations around and many individuals around who are, well, some, to be frank, are, you know, fairly opposed to carbon offsetting because they really strongly believe that the only way to deal with the climate crisis is to actually not emit in the first place, that you can't actually offset or, you know, compensate for the emissions from various activities. And other organisations have, I suppose, less stringent views about the role of offsetting as one component of an overall strategy. You can kind of see this debate playing out at a national level, where there's discussions around whether or not as a country we should be able to buy international offsets to allow us to keep exporting coal or to do the kind of emissions intensive activities that we do. Our organisation at Renew is probably closer to the more stringent end of the line, but we still believe that there is a role for carbon offsetting at some point, but reduction and alternatives in terms of particularly energy generation and use, we like to see prioritised before offsets.
Great, thank you. Well, that's the end of the questions, so I might jump off again and let you crack on with the second half of the presentation. Thanks, Damien.
Okay. So yeah, thanks everybody for those questions. The second half, and this is going to be a little bit quicker, we're going to talk about saving energy at home. Now, we've only sort of got about, I think, 15 or so minutes. So there's lots and lots and lots of aspects to talking about saving energy and energy efficiency at home, but I'm going to try and cover off on a few quickly and talk and probably frame it a little bit in terms of what we're all going through at the moment, particularly given that we're all at home, we're all using certain types of energy, certain end uses, certain appliances more, and frame things, I hope, in a way that's relevant to people's experience at the moment. The first thing with any kind of energy saving presentation I like to do is put up a couple of quick slides just to talk about some very quick, easy options that people can do. Ultimately, all energy efficiency, renewable energy, technologies, all of these things cost money. They might cost a little bit, or they might cost a lot, and they will save you energy and money down the track. But there's two things that you can do without spending any money and can actually save quite a bit on your energy bills. First of all is to look at your retailers and look at your tariffs and work out whether or not you're actually on the best tariff or retail plan. Best way to do this is to use a tariff comparator website, and the best one in Victoria is Victorian Energy Compare, the slide I've got here, the web address at the bottom. This is the government's tariff comparator website in Victoria. There are thousands of retail tariff offers for residential in Victoria, so it's not just a matter of ringing one or two retailers and getting a sense of the market. You actually have to use a tariff comparator site, and we prefer the government ones to the private sites because the government ones actually present you most of the offers that exist in the market. If you go to this website now, Daniel Andrews will pay you $50 just for using the comparator site, even if you don't change retailers, which is good. And yeah, you plug in a bit of information about your electricity and or gas usage, a bit of info about the homes and the appliances, and the comparator will spit out, you know, the top 10 or top 20 cheapest offers for you on an annual basis. It's a really good site. The other thing I like to mention at the start is if you really are struggling with your energy bills, electricity or gas, Victorian government does have a good concessions program, concessions being a rebate to, you know, low-income households and households that are struggling to meet their energy repayments. And obviously with working from home and being from home during COVID, this is becoming more of an issue. So I just wanted to put up this slide with that web address there. It's run by the Department of Health and Human Services. Concessions, there is eligibility criteria. It can result in about a 20 to 30% reduction on your bills, but really worth checking out if those bills are creeping up and you're starting to struggle to meet them. Now, what are the major users, household energy users and costs? Well, it's different in different parts of the country, but we are in Melbourne, or at least in Victoria, so we're going to focus on Melbourne households. This is a typical breakdown of the energy used for different end uses or different appliances in a typical Melbourne home. And as you can see, your two big ones, heating and hot water. Irrespective of whether we're talking about electricity or gas or even wood, if you're out in the regions, what we find consistently at Renew is that Victorian homes, half to 3/4 of the energy use is heating and hot water. So if you're not tackling those two things, you're not really going to bite into a big chunk in terms of reducing either your energy use or your bills. I'm going to focus on heating. I'm not going to have time to talk about hot water, but happy to answer questions on that. But I'm going to talk about heating just given where we are coming into winter, and also the fact that a lot of us are working from home more, that heating is a real issue for a lot of people at the moment. What can you do about it? What can you do to maintain what we call thermal comfort? And why does it happen? Why does it happen is because we have what's called heat transfer. We live in, unfortunately, a lot of us, fairly leaky homes, air moving in and out through the floor and the walls and the roof, through around windows and doors and through exhaust fans and vents and all sorts of different places you can't even imagine. And so we're in wintertime, we are losing heat that we're putting into the home. We're losing it to the outside, and to a lesser extent in the summertime, that heat is gaining into the house when we don't want it. Worth making the quick point that newer homes are better than older homes. So if you live in a building or a home that's was built after 2005, it's likely to be far better energy performance than one before that. But if you're in a typical Victorian kind of weatherboard, or certainly a home that was built more than 20 years ago, it's likely to be leaky, and it's likely to have thermal efficiency, what we call thermal efficiency opportunities. So how do we achieve better thermal comfort? To start with, for us, it's not about the gadgets and the appliances. It's actually about thinking through how you actually use the space, how you use the building and the home. So asking yourself the question, thinking about how you actually use each room, walking around and going, well, how much time do I actually spend in some of these rooms, or my family or my roommates, who spends what amount of time in what room? What are the most frequented spaces? And then thinking about, what do you need in terms of heating? Do you actually need whole of house 24/7 heating? And this applies to cooling as well. Or can you actually use rooms in certain ways? Can you zone rooms? Can you look at just heating a much smaller part of the house rather than a whole of house system? Once you start to think about those more frequented spaces, then you can get into those rooms, and there might only be one or two in the house, and actually have a good look at them inside the room, looking around for gaps under the doors, wall vents, which are very common in homes. Wall vents were there for open wood fires and unflue gas heaters, and we hardly have any of those anymore. And so wall vents don't really provide a useful role. And of course, particularly around gaps around windows. What are you trying to achieve overall? Generally, you're trying to achieve, in simple terms, a sealed box. That's really, whether you look at a building or whether you look at a room, from a thermal efficiency point of view, you're trying to achieve a relatively well-sealed box. Some air change, some air movement is actually good. It's actually helpful for the staleness of the air and public health. But our homes generally have a lot more air changes per hour, way more than we actually need to maintain a good, healthy outcome. So to achieve that box, what can you do? It's all of those typical draft ceiling type things, which I'm sure you've come across before. Sealing up around window frames, under doors or around doors. You can close up vents either by using as basic as filler in the vents themselves, or boarding them up, or look at the outside of the vent on the outside wall of the house, looking at boarding them up from that perspective. If you've got timber floors, there's products to use in between the joins in the floor itself to prevent that airflow from happening. Now, a lot of these things you can do DIY. There's certainly things that renters can do. A lot of the little the gadgets, I guess, are available in your typical hardware stores. Or you can have this professionally done. There are good companies out there that will come in, do an assessment from a draft ceiling perspective, and they will come in and install draft ceiling measures. Curtains and pelmets are classic, really good, particularly for southern states kind of homes. The curtains, long, heavy set curtains provide a lot better insulation than probably the single pane of glass sitting behind it. And the pelmet provides a really important role in preventing that warm air that you might be putting into the room from a heating system from going back down behind the curtains and straight out that single pane glass. Other little gadgets, things like draft stoppers are great. These things are there to put on the inside or in vents and extractor fans that you've got in the ceiling or in the walls to try and it actually closes up essentially those vents and gaps. When the fan's in operation, they'll open and exhaust what they need to exhaust, but for most of the time when they're not in use, they'll actually close up that gap. Vent directors are great. A simple thing that renters can do. 90% of homes in Victoria are on the gas network, and a lot of those have gas ducted heating, and they'll have those gas vents in the floors. Those vents are often around the edges of the rooms and often right under windows, and without the vents, you get a whole lot of heat that comes out of the vent, goes straight out the single pane glass window in the room. These things can push that heat back into the center of the room and get a better even distribution of heat. Thermostat control is important. There's an old rule of thumb we used to talk about: for every extra degree that in winter that you're turning up the thermostat, or in summer you're turning it down, you're going to increase the energy use by around 10%. If a building or if the room's relatively well performed in terms of thermal efficiency, then you can reduce, particularly in winter, the thermostat, keep it down at around 18 to 20 degrees rather than running it at 24 or 26. If you're running it that high, then there probably is some thermal improvements, some draft ceiling type measures you can be doing around that room. Insulation, really important one. Still, ceiling insulation is generally the best, most cost-effective type of insulation to do, particularly your big bat rolls type of insulation, which is preventing heat transfer across the ceiling. The foil stuff there is really more for preventing heat gain in summer. Wall insulation is great, effective, but unfortunately in existing homes is expensive. It's an expensive project generally, and won't have the same favourable economics, I suppose, as ceiling insulation, and is pretty much not a DIY project. Underfloor insulation. I really like underfloor insulation. I've just done a project here at home. Particularly, you've got those classic timber floor on stumps kind of floor construction, and there's a bit of a gap under there. You'd be amazed at the installers what little gap they can work with. And underfloor insulation works really well on a room-by-room basis. So here at home, I've just done 2 rooms in the last few months. It's made a big difference in one of the rooms I'm standing in now, which I'm working out of now every day. And not quite as cost-effective probably as ceiling insulation, but still definitely worth looking at depending on the floor structure and how the house is sort of set up. Some of these tips are obviously for renters, some aren't. We've got a lot of experience and advice for renters on our website. We actually produced a renter's guide to sustainable living many, many years ago and updated it in the last couple of years. So just pointing you to this one. This guide has lots of tips and tricks, not just for heating or not just for energy, but also for water usage and waste and other things, and also some guidance on how to approach your landlord in tackling some of these things. So would really encourage you to have a look at that. So in terms of heating, what I've really been talking about is the building itself, the building shell, how you can improve the building shell. No matter how well sealed you get it, most homes still at the end of the day are then going to need to use some form of appliance to provide mechanical or active heating. But of course, the more efficient the building is, much less of this that you'll need to do. Appliances, heating appliances, there is an endless amount of heating appliances available at the moment and throughout the course of the last 50 to 100 years while we've had active kind of heating in homes. So can't sort of cover them all off in the short amount of time we've got tonight, but it's everything from, you know, resistive bar radiators, gas heaters, oil heaters, wood burners, which are coming into urban areas, unfortunately, a bit more frequently. Particularly in Victoria, we've got a lot of gas ducted systems under the floor, reverse cycle air conditioners, which I'll talk about in a moment. You've got your kind of gas wall furnaces for single rooms, electric panel heaters, plug-in heaters, which, you know, you kind of get from your Harvey Norman type places. And then you start to get into your personal heaters, your traditional, you know, hot water bottles, but actually the personal heating device market has really taken off, and you can get all sorts of different gadgets to heat just your body or parts of your body and actually cool them as well. Now, that's quite confusing. There's really too many to talk about. But the way we think about heating really is to divide them up into really three categories. You're talking about either a whole of house heating, and it might be also a cooling system, or you're talking about room by room heaters, so where you're just trying to temperature control within one room in the house, or it's down to your personal heater level. And these are interesting because they can be quite low powered devices. And, you know, you can be sitting in a cold room, but you're warm because you're wearing an electric jacket or heated Ugg boots like the picture there. They can have a role. A few points on these different appliances. Really, what's in a general sense, particularly from a whole of house or a room perspective, what is the most efficient and least cost to run? Well, it's a pretty clear winner these days. It's actually reverse cycle air conditioning. Traditionally in Australia, these were installed for cooling, and some of them could only do that, provide cooling, but increasingly they are reverse cycle systems, and increasingly people are understanding that you can run them to provide heat. And they, by far and away, compared to any other room or whole of house system, they are the most efficient by a long way heating options that you have. 4 to 5 times more efficient than resistive electric heating, and can be 6 to 13 times more efficient than a gas heater, depending on how old that gas heater is. So if you have one, particularly if you have one existing in the home now, in the room that you're using a lot, run it in winter, run it for heating. And I mean, these things, they can cost, you know, 25, 50 cents an hour to run and provide you with very low energy, very low cost heating. Plug-in panel heaters, another really common one worth just touching on. These have a role in our view. They are basically a traditional resistive technology. They look modern compared to the old ones, but they're essentially traditional electrical technology. They're not efficient. They're not highly inefficient. They're a bit like your kettle. It's just 1 unit of energy in and 1 unit of heat out. There's no real efficiency gain. They are similar to kind of your oil heaters and sort of your bar radiators of years past. Our view is that they're kind of good for small rooms for a few hours if you're not trying to heat too big a space and you're not trying to heat it all day. But if you have, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 of these and you're trying to heat a larger space and you're doing it over the entire working day, and they're kind of your primary heating source, they are going to add up in terms of your energy bills. On the gas side of the equation, gas ones typically really fall into 2 categories. It's kind of room heaters, your sort of fluid gas heater there on the top left, or your kind of gas wall furnace there on the right, or you're talking about your whole of house kind of gas system, which in Victoria is mostly your gas ducted with the ducts under the floor and the burners sitting outside. Gas as a technology, or all combustion technology, is lower efficiency. The efficiency will depend on how old the unit is. An old unit, particularly an old gas ducted unit with ducts that may have leaks and tears in it, they will be highly inefficient. A brand new gas ducted system will be a lot more efficient than an old one. So, you know, efficiency is a relative concept. But if you do have an much older unit, and it is a whole of house unit, and you can't use it to zone different rooms, you've got to supply it to the whole house at once, you will find that these units do use a lot of energy and do end up with a lot of cost. If you've got a room by room system, or you can just focus on one gas heater in one room and some thermal efficiency measures, then you'll be able to keep that gas energy usage down. Now, I think I'm almost up for time here, so I'm just going to go to one more slide here. Obviously, there's lots of different measures you can look at in terms of heating and thermal comfort. there's a really good study that was done published last year by Sustainability Victoria, and I just want to point people towards this. I'm not going to go through this table, but essentially they actually did retrofits of energy efficiency measures in about 60 or 80 different homes, and they recorded all of the costs and the energy reductions and the bill savings and the carbon savings from all of these different measures. And this table has got a whole lot of different measures there they did in different homes, and they've ranked it by payback time, fastest to longest. And it's a really good reference point for you to see, which ones are actually, in the top 5, in the top 10. And it is your typical things like low flow shower heads still, pool pumps are in there, ceiling insulation, draft ceiling, there's a couple of white goods in there, lighting's another one if you've still got inefficient halogen lighting. And yeah, a couple of white goods in there, clothes washers and fridges can end up with reasonable economic returns and energy reductions. So I just direct you to have a look at that, just that table and that report, and it gives you a sense of which ones are worth doing, what things are going to cost, what they're going to cost in terms of your budget, and might give you a starting point to decide which bits am I going to tackle first. And with that, I think I'm going to hand back to Sam and we'll do a bit of Q&A.
Great, thanks so much, Damien. Can I just ask to start with, are there any Victorian government rebates for energy efficiency work at home?
Energy efficiency, yes. A lot of the technology is there. So there's a scheme that's been around in Victoria for a long time. It used to be called the Victorian Energy Efficiency Target. It's now called the Victorian Energy Savers Program, I think. It's a scheme, it's a bit like the Renewable Energy Target scheme nationally. What it does is that it discounts the costs of eligible technology, and it does it in a way that actually consumers don't know that it's done that. So it's a discount at the point of sale, and it's done with the supplier. So when you, as an example, when you go and buy an LED light bulb, and the light bulb was going to cost $4, it ended up actually costing $2 and that's the price that you see, because the price has already been discounted because of this scheme. It's a good scheme. Mostly it has actually delivered lighting in Victoria over the last 10 years, but there is a number of other technologies in there. In Victoria, the other probably main one to mention is Solar Victoria does have a rebate scheme. Obviously, it's largely targeted at solar PV, but there is actually a very good hot water rebate, which is quite undersubscribed in that scheme. It provides a $1,000 rebate for efficient hot water systems, and yeah, really worth going to the Solar Victoria website to check that one out.
Great, thank you. Now let's hop to some of the questions that have been asked. So the first one here is, with ducted gas heating, would you recommend closing the ducted heating floor vents in unused rooms, or would this mess up the circulation and perhaps result in leakage out of gaps, do you think?
No, closing up the vents is fine. The problem with those vents is, and I have them in my place, I've decommissioned the system, but the vents are still there. Those vents really generally don't seal. So they won't. So what actually happens is there's still a bit of heat coming through them even when you're actually trying to close them off. So no kind of huge risk there other than, particularly the older kind of gas ducted systems, they are hard to zone just practically because those vents are not really sealed vents.
Okay, so the next one is about underfloor insulation and wondering whether it can lead to any damage to wood floorboards from excess moisture.
No, not that I'm aware of, and I've done a few of these projects personally in different homes over the last 10 years, and I certainly haven't had that feedback from industry. It's probably worth checking that with a supplier, but it's not something I'm aware of that's a widespread issue.
Okay, thank you. Can you give us an indication of how much it typically costs to install and buy and install a reverse cycle air conditioner?
Yeah, obviously it does depend on the size of the unit, but if we're talking about, sort of living spaces or medium-sized room where it's a frequent space that you're going to inhabit from working from home or what have you, then you're talking about kind of 4, 5, 6 kilowatt output units in a large living space that might be up towards kind of more 7, 8, maybe even 10 kilowatts. You know, 4 or 5 kilowatt unit, medium size. You know, I've just installed a 4 kilowatt unit here a few months ago. That was around $2,000 installed. You can often get the units for around $1,000, a bit more, and you've got to pay obviously $600-700 for installation. A larger unit than that, if you're getting up around 7 or 8 kilowatts or more units, then you know it might be getting closer to sort of 3,000, maybe 2,500 with to 3 with installation.
Okay, thank you. Can you make a comment, Damien, on hydronic heating, whether it be gas-fired or electric hydronic heating, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Hydronic heating is fantastic. The thing about hydronic is that it's a type of heating source, what we call a radiant heating source. So it's a very even kind of distribution of heat. With reverse cycle aircon, it is what we call a convective heating type of heating. So it's more, you're actually blowing warm air to try and control the temperature in the room. So hydronic does have that advantage. Hydronic, no matter how you do it, is a much larger energy use, and it doesn't matter whether you use gas as the fuel source or wood, or even if you use a heat pump as the burner. It ends up being still quite a large energy use, and there's no way to do hydronic projects cheaply, because you're talking about the burner, whatever that might be. You're talking about a lot of pipe work and radiators or underfloor systems and a lot of labour. So, and you know, at the moment, still gas hydronic is the cheapest way to go, but you very rarely see projects, particularly for an existing home, that's done for less than about $10,000, and your wood and your heat pump ones are considerably sort of more than that. It does always provide a lovely result once someone's done it. I don't think I've heard of any negative feedback from someone living with hydronic, but the cost and the energy use, I mean, heating water to then heat the air is less efficient than just heating the air or the space directly. So, and they are large units, so they do tend to use quite a lot of energy.
Okay, thank you. Question here about which gas ducting is better, floor or ceiling?
Well, if you're providing, usually it's for providing heat, so floor would be generally regarded as better. When you're trying to pump heat down from the ceiling down, it's kind of working against the natural flow of hot air. And so, yeah, that's part of the challenge with kind of your reverse cycle whole of house systems, in that the vents generally for those systems are always put in the roof, because they were largely used for cooling, and now increasingly those systems are being put in for heating, but really heating vents will work better at the lower level of the room, whether that's on the floor or at the lower part of the wall.
That's a nice segue into the next question, which is about, can you retrofit a reverse cycle to pump hot air through the floor and cool air through the roof ducts, or should it come through one duct system?
Retrofitting a reverse cycle unit, if you're talking about onto a gas ducted system, will probably be difficult. It's probably not impossible. There'll be some smart people and even DIY people that can work out how to do that, but it'll be difficult probably getting a supplier to do that. So, you know, whether or not, I mean, ideally, yes, you would, if you're installing the reverse cycle unit primarily for heat, you would actually use a distribution system, which is done under the floor, or at least sort of lower parts of the wall. But yeah, using existing ducting is not going to be easy. And also the problem with existing ducting and ducting in general is that the longer it's there, it's going to wear, it's going to degrade, it's going to get little tears. And that's what we see with old, particularly gas ducted systems, is that when they're more than 10, 15 years old, you're losing a lot of the heat out through the ducts before it even gets to the room, which again is why the efficiency can really be lowered.
Thank you. Now, the next question takes us back, I think, to the first bit of the presentation around renewable energy, and it's a question related to solar. So what is the average cost of getting solar, and is the government rebate system the only financial assistance available for people looking to get solar?
Yeah, good question. So there's in Victoria, there's basically 2 rebates for solar PV. So we're talking about here solar panels that generate electricity. There's the federal scheme, which is the same scheme, the Renewable Energy Target Scheme. That scheme for 20 years has discounted the system cost by about 20% or so. That's automatic, everybody gets that. And then the second rebate is the Solar Victoria rebate, which currently is about $1,800. There is some additional, there's some eligibility criteria around that, so you would have to meet that, but it's pretty broad. So taking those two things into account, then you're talking about, okay, well then what system size am I getting? Most household sizes fit between, a small system's about 3 kilowatts and a very large system's about 10. The average is really around 5 to 6, and that's actually what most of the electricity networks will allow you to install. It can be harder to go above about 6 to 6.5 kilowatts. So for a medium-sized system, 5 to 6 kilowatts, good quality system, good inverter, good long warranties. You can be talking around, sort of $6,000 to $8,000 if you use what we call micro inverters. It can be a little bit more expensive than that. And that's just with the federal government rebate. But then if you also get the Solar Victoria rebate, then you're taking almost another $2,000 off of that. The kind of bill savings you can get, nothing really does as well as solar PV does in terms of bill savings. So, a medium-sized system there, 5 to 6 kilowatts for most homes is going to save them $1,500, maybe up to sort of $2,000 a year off their electricity bills. That payback time may be faster if you also got the Victorian Solar Victoria rebate and only paid maybe $4,000 or so for the system. So if people, like all technology, it's a bit complex and the rebates are complex. We generally recommend people, before they start going out and getting quotes, actually getting an assessment done at home. So we do this. It's not actually an in-home assessment. We actually do it by getting your meter data and your bills and doing a little bit of a modelling exercise, looking at Google Earth, working out a rough position of the panels, and then actually modelling different system sizes with different costs and seeing what they'll actually save. And you do that little feasibility step first, and then you can work out what the optimal system size is for you, and then you can go out and get 3 or more quotes and assess them. So we do that at work through a program called our Energy Consults. If you're interested in that, have a look at the Renew website and we might be able to help you.
Great, thank you. One last question about warranties. What do you consider to be a good warranty on solar panels and inverters?
Yeah, warranties on solar is a bit detailed. So there's different parts to the warranty. There's a product warranty on the panels, or a defect warranty as we call it on the panels. There is a performance guarantee on the panels. There is a separate warranty for the inverter. And then there is a workmanship or an installation warranty. For us, panels have been around a long time now. They're fairly simple technology. We're actually pretty comfortable with most panels in the market and with most of the warranties. The lower end of the warranties are around, the defect warranties are around 12 years, and the higher end is around, actually you can get 25-year warranties on the panels. We still think a lot of the ones around 12 to 15 years are actually pretty good panels and unlikely to have too many issues with. We focus a bit more on inverters. We're a bit less confident about some of the inverters in the market, and we like to see good inverters with long warranties being used. And for us, that really means as close as possible to 10 years for the inverter, and bearing in mind that the inverter will only last around 10 years anyway. It doesn't last as long as the panels will. And also for that reason, we like to see the workmanship warranty be around 10 years as well, so that if anything goes wrong within the 10 years with the inverter or with the panels, you can get the labour associated with repair or replacement as part of the warranty, not you don't have to pay for that and only get the component under the warranty.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of the questions. And thank you very much, Damien, for your presentation on both buying renewables and offsets for home, but also on the energy efficiency and saving energy at home as well.